do you want from me? Why don't you run from me? What are you wanting?
Hello lovelies. Today's a bit different even from Off Topic Tuesday. There's a hell of a lot going on in the world that we could talk about, obviously, such as whether the penny has finally dropped for some Trump supporters. Probably not, but instead we're going to talk about something else. I want to talk about something deeply personal, very political, and potentially very life-changing for a lot of people, after a fashion. Anyway, there's a UK terminally ill adults end-of-life bill working its way through our political system, aka the assisted dying bill. So, as a partially disabled, chronically depressed guy who has tried to end it all more than once, I think this matters, and it's worth talking about more than a little. I think it might matter to you as well, in various ways, for one reason or another, and I think I perhaps have a little bit of insight. So on June 20th, MPs in the Commons voted by 314 to 291 in favour of allowing mentally competent adults with less than 6 months to live to be able to request medical assistance to die with dignity, go out with a little bit of class. So it now goes to the House of Lords for further debate, and if it passes and receives royal assent, likely by late this year, it would then still take about 4 years to fully implement and get everything in place. So effectively we're looking at about 2029 for it to go live, if you pardon the expression. Now, this change in the law only applies in England and Wales due to the peculiar makeup of the United Kingdom, and only applies for residents over 18 with stable GP registration. So you can't shop around for a pliant doctor who's more willing. You'll have to have been seeing a doctor for a reasonable amount of time. It also takes 2 independent doctor assessments, each spaced at least a week apart. You also have to pass a multidisciplinary panel consisting of a social worker, a legal expert, and a psychiatrist who will review the request and your condition and so on before anything is approved. So it's a very narrow circumstance and has a lot of safeguards to it. Nothing is perfect, of course. Should it pass into law and start to happen, there will begin to be edge cases where things go wrong, such as the nature of these things. It doesn't necessarily mean it's bad or good, it just means that there is human error in all walks of life if it happens enough, if anything happens enough. The patient will get to self-administer the medication that ends their life, so that final step will be entirely theirs. No one is forced to do this. Doctors, pharmacists or carers can opt out at any time, and someone else can step in to take part in it. So just because you are a social worker or a doctor or a pharmacist or a carer or a psychiatrist or whatever doesn't mean you will be forced to make decisions on whether people can end their lives or not. You can opt out. There's funding available for advocates for people with disabilities, autism, mental health issues, and a new disability advisory board. Again, this is all as an attempt to sort of safeguard people from being exploited or pressured and so on. For me, and for many with chronic disabilities or depression, every single day can feel like a slog, even without a terminal diagnosis. The right to choose when enough is enough is a powerful concept, but one I don't think should be extended to people with psychological conditions. Other people disagree with me on that one, but to me it seems like that's not a particularly good reason to end your life, and that has been known to happen in other nations with assisted dying being legal. And in the past, campaigners like Sir Terry Pratchett, who was devastated by Alzheimer's, he believed that to back assisted dying was to choose life. It's time we learned to be as good at dying as we are at living. I think that's what he said. Groups like Dignity and Dying, with patrons like Pratchett and Sir Patrick Stewart, have always pushed for choice and autonomy at the end of life. And it has happened that this has become legal in certain other jurisdictions, and it's something that does go on, whether legal or not. Living wills and doctors and family deciding that it's probably best for someone to be able to choose to go out painlessly and on their own terms. And prosecutions are often avoided in these cases. So this is more a way of bringing this kind of thing into relative legality. That's what it seems to really be about, rather than leaving it in this kind of grey, woolly area where it's illegal, but it does go on. But the system tries to be understanding, but often isn't. But as I say, this has already happened in other jurisdictions. In Oregon in the US, they pioneered the Death with Dignity Act, which is a very similar model, doctor approval, self-administered drugs to end your life. Australia, Canada, Belgium have also all permitted assisted dying, with robust reporting and oversight, transparent data on doctor refusals, safeguards, and there has to be no evidence of coercion being exerted on anyone. Evidence from Canada shows that many applications are rejected, and certainly not every psychiatric case gets a green light. The right wing, who by and large will let disabled and mentally ill people go hang as far as they're concerned, do seem very concerned with assisted dying, peculiarly. You think they'd be for it, given their far-right roots. But they also tend to blow edge cases out of all proportion, particularly when it comes to Canada. I think the US's relative proximity to Canada has led a lot of Americans to catastrophize assisted dying, which is a bit weird and a bit unfair to Canada and to Canadians who choose assisted dying as the right option for them. But yeah, there will always be edge cases, as I said earlier. There will always be mistakes, as I said earlier. But is there a greater good that justifies very rare, very occasional mistakes? Probably. So far, reputable programs haven't really shown any abuse, though those handful of edge cases have been blown out of all proportion. But we do have to make sure that we keep watching, and there are valid concerns about this sort of thing. There is coercion risk, where vulnerable people could be pressured by family or finances into choosing to end their lives prematurely, when they don't really want to, for the sake of other people, for the sake of their family, or because of the costs that might be incurred by end-of-life care for them. Palliative care neglect could create a choice between pain-minimizing care and pain-ending care through assisted dying. There's a possibility that the scope of these kind of rulings and what is permissible under them could start to creep bigger and bigger. Sure, we start with terminal illness, but could that then expand to chronic suffering, to debilitating chronic pain, things like that? Could it be built out from here? And probably, but that's where you have to watch things and make sure that it doesn't creep too far. The bill here in the UK does address these kind of things. It does have advocacy roles built into it, the Disability Advisory Board. It only permits self-administration, so someone else can't put you to sleep, only you can put yourself to sleep. There's all the panel oversight, there's all the doctors, there's all the safeguards. but there was High Court oversight as part of it, and that has been removed. And some people think that that could weaken the protections, though the High Court honestly has better things to do than to rule on dozens of end-of-life rulings every day. Critics like the Bishop of London and Care Not Killing warn of slippery slopes and a lack of debate time on this issue. Some MPs have flipped between votes because of concerns over the relative speed and the safeguards that are available. As someone living with chronic depression and disability, it's hard not to think, what if I reach a tipping point where my suffering outweighs my quality of life? That doesn't seem remotely possible at the moment, but I think once you develop a chronic illness of some kind, these kind of things do start to impinge on your mind. And you start to wonder, what would it take? How bad would things have to be before, you consider these things? But equally, because I suffer from chronic, quite debilitating depression, I also know that I can be out of my mind and wanting to die, which is why the mentally competent part is so important. This bill doesn't mandate death, it grants people a choice, autonomy, a sense of control, and I think it's meaningful and it's good to have that, even if I would never use it. So I feel kind of cautiously hopeful. This feels like a more civilized way to go about things, especially as the population gets older and older and people live longer and longer with quite debilitating conditions that leave them no real quality of life. Public backing is strong. Polls show about 75% of people are in favour of some form of assisted dying. There has been a bit of a political shift. Starmer voted in favour of it, even though the cabinet is split on the issue. Health Secretary Streeting, he abstained from the vote. The margins have narrowed. The Lords usually like to follow precedent, and they rarely block a Commons bill unless it's really egregious. But this is such a personal thing to a lot of people, that the votes are very much in the realm of people's personal choice and experience. So we'll see, but nothing is certain until the Lords have had their say. They can choose to amend the legislation. It will then go back to the Commons for further amendments and votes and so on, but they can only delay it for so long, even if they choose to. They could try to add additional layers like mandatory counselling or a delay to the timeline. There's no real way to know what will happen there. It's just a matter of time. But we, as the public, we can keep an eye on things, particularly the House of Lords debates, which start soon. We can apply pressure to MPs to express our opinion one way or the other, especially those who have vacillated between being for and against. There are support groups and charities and pressure groups on both sides that we could get involved in. But to me, this is ultimately a matter of personal autonomy and choice, and the safeguards are about making sure that it is a choice. And you should ultimately be the arbiter of choice over your own body and what you do with it and what you get up to it. So long as unnecessary harm is not being done. But being able to choose when and how you go out, especially if your life is no longer worth living in your estimation, that to me seems like an expression of freedom. Perhaps the ultimate freedom. I'm cautiously optimistic about all this. I hope it does go through and that people do have the option, but I also hope there are sufficient safeguards. I'll keep my eyes open and on the issue. This is very deeply personal to a lot of people. People's morality and their spirituality and so on often get involved in these sorts of decisions. I am actually genuinely curious what you think. Just try not to blast each other in the comments or anything. Just, I guess, explain why you're for or against. and those reasons, whatever they are, they're valid for you. I'm just curious what they are, if you're for it or against it, or if you have experience with family with terminal illnesses, chronic debilitating pain, things like that, and how that informs your decision. Whatever the case, take care of yourselves. Zang. Sup, I'm reliably informed that I'm terrible at pimping my stuff, so here I am, pimping my stuff. You can buy most of that shit that I make over at post-mort.com. Hope to see you there.